friends. I have lots of friends in this audience today, people who we have done this kind of work for many, many years. Mine actually is to introduce the team, and particularly who is led and leading this particular report that he'll be presenting. And I will do so by way of a brief history, very brief history in 3 minutes or 5 of policy think tanking in Kenya. I met Professor Nyong'o, I think, in 1992. I was a young economist at the World Bank, and he was then part of a group called the Young Turks. But I was much younger than him. I was sought out and introduced to him by a mutual friend. His name is Robert Shaw. He was then Secretary for Policy, Ford. The purpose was to put together an idea, come from Professor Nyong'o, to prepare a policy compendium to help the opposition, which was then very new in Kenya, to be able to write manifestos. You can imagine, we hadn't had an opposition for maybe since a couple of years after independence, and the opposition was expected, or we expected the opposition to compete on basis of ideas. So Professor Nyong'o came up with this idea of putting together a compendium of policy ideas around which the opposition, a resource book, so to speak. It was called the Post-Election Action Program. I recall that by the time we were launching the PEEP, the opposition had kind of fragmented. We launched the report at Serena, and the only opposition leader who showed up was Jaramogi. So it kind of then got to be associated a bit with Ford Kenya. Anyway, PEEP gave birth to the Institute of Economic Affairs, which I had a little time before I went back to school, so I volunteered to help Professor set it up. So I spent the month of July, I think August, and a bit of September of 1993 setting up the IEA, of which Prof became chair. And then the IEA became the center of economic think tanking in the country, did many, many things. I think before I left, in those couple of months, we updated the PEEP in a report called Agenda Something. I then came back a bit later. It had run into headwinds. We found Betty Minor with the Prof and some friends. She took over, did a report called Our Problems, Our Solutions. Then a young man called Arthur Muliro showed up. He helped us to do a project which called the Kenya Scenarios Project in the late 90s, brought together a lot of people. He also started in the process, because IEA was conceived to support the political opposition, particularly in parliament. We then started a parliamentary strengthening program, which ultimately was adopted by parliament. And did a lot of things, advocated for strengthening parliamentary oversight of the budget, pushed through a law called the Fiscal Management Act, together with the late Olo Aringo and many other people. So, and on and on and on. So I don't want to bore you with the politics of it, from Ford to Ford Kenya, to something called Mwangaza Trust, which we've traveled with Prof here, which, by the way, Prof, I still have the trust deed in my house, to SDP, and SDP is how we ended up in NAC, with the Prof and a couple of other people, some politicians who are now in all types of political formations. And NAC is how Prof became the Minister for Economic Planning from SDP. Incidentally, the idea of free primary education that was implemented by NAC came from SDP's manifesto. So when NAC came into office, Prof became Minister for ERS, for planning, and he invited yours truly, together with another gentleman, the late Harry Mule, so he's a dear friend of ours, and a young man called Caleb Opon, to do something we call the economic recovery strategy. The idea behind the economic recovery strategy was a turnaround plan for the economy for 3 years. And then that, as we were implementing that, we would then be developing a long-term vision, development vision for Kenya, which we now call Vision 2030. Of course, NAC also ran into headwinds of sorts, and by the time that first term was ending, you had the electoral referendum, and all sorts of other things. I think the rest is fairly recent history. But of course, many of the ideas, if you go into many of the ideas today that are still informing policy, and you do an audit, you will find them in the PEEP, you will find them in those reports that we were doing those days. You will, of course, find them in the ERS and the many contributions that went into it. And you will find them, in fact, going way back. Because when you look at those ideas, you will find that they are the same issues that have 65. How do you prevent too much concentration of economic power and resources in a few hands? You will find that discussion in a report done by the NCCK in 1967 called Who Controls Industry in Kenya. It was banned, but you can still find it. The challenge of employment, equitable growth, poverty, ILO report 1972. The challenge of rapidly growing population and creating jobs. How do you distribute, or how do you allocate capital so that it creates jobs for rapidly growing population? Session of paper number 1 of 1986. And you go in all those ideas, you will find they're there. So why do we have so many ideas discussing the same things, and we will be discussing the same things over the next several months for a new vision? I think the most important lesson I have learned from this business of think tanking is that the most important output of think tanks is not ideas, it is people. People are the most important output. What do I mean by people? I mean the people who take part in these exercises. You might call them vision carriers, who then come from those processes with certain world view about the country. I can see Prof. Smoking there. He was one of the early think tankers in the governance space, with something called Clarion. It used to make a lot of noise on corruption and such things, and you can see where he is. So these people, a critical mass of people who are always seized of the question, how can our country do better? You keep asking yourself, surely, how can our country do better? And the more of those people that you have, the more likely that a country can move towards a consensus on development. So, I am very delighted that Prof has not let go of that. That even now, as he completes his term of governor, he is asking himself, how can our country do better? And he's asking himself, what do I do next? I think he's put together this team so that we can all ask ourselves, and now in a much more pluralistic sense. When we were doing that, we were very few when we started out. We would probably be in a group of no more than 10, 15 people. But now the whole country appreciates the importance of participating in the process of thinking about how to make our country do better. So, Prof, thank you very much, and your team. I now want to invite you to come and make your remarks, and then I think after that, Prof. Michael Shege will make some remarks also, and then Prof. Nkaruti will present highlights of the report. We will have some reactions from representative of Labor. Mr. Tuoli is here in person. Just Betty will make some comments, reactions on industry. And Betty Minor will make some reactions from the think tank community, the scholars, the professionals, the technocrats that I have mentioned before we invite the team to hand over the report to His Excellency. I submit.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, and leaders in various sectors in our Republic. Let me first of all begin by introducing the team I've been working with. Can the team stand up wherever they are? They're rather scattered all over. Anyway. If you could just say your name from right to left, yes. And? Very good, thank you very much. There's another, yes? Eddie Ila, okay. Another one? I think they're finished. Where are the ladies? I knew. I stand guilty as charged. The Kenya Proposed Development Plan 2030 to 2060. In January 2026, His Excellency the President, William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, announced to the nation that he would be requesting me to take leadership in the preparation of a national development strategy whose implementation would result in the transformation of Kenya into a modern democratic state, whose citizens enjoy standards of living comparable to those prevalent in the developed countries. An onerous task. Earlier in November 2025, His Excellency the President had shared with Kenyans that he was grappling with the issue of the future of Kenya. For the next 30 to 50 years, especially with the looming end of the Vision 2030, which was inaugurated in 2008, is set to expire in 2028. On that occasion, the President announced that the start of an elaborated long-term program for investment in infrastructure necessary for the transition of Kenya from its current status as a lower middle-income country to a first-world economy within the next generation. I took the President's request as a privilege to play a role in making our country transition from its current status as a lower middle-income economy to a modern, industrialized, and high-income economy. In embarking on this mission, I was concerned, as the President definitely is, and as every Kenyan should be, that Kenyans must now make a major transformational change that would eliminate the major handicaps identified at independence as follows: poverty, lack of adequate learning, and access to modern healthcare for all. We as a country face more competition than before. Nations that were next to us and across the continent are investing in massive infrastructure projects and programs that should concern us are perhaps leaving us behind. We are losing markets to our competitors in exports and tourism. In any case, merely being dominant in the region is not good enough for Kenya. Kenya's peers like Singapore have overcome the world. They are the ones we should be aiming at catching up with. I agree with His Excellency the President's belief that a developed nation status in 30 to 40 years is achievable by Kenya. I believe it is possible for a Kenyan being born in the next few years to be the last of our citizens to live in what is called a third world or a developing country. This is an achievable Kenyan aspiration. The document we present to the President today, as you see it on the board there, outlines the first steps towards the preparation of the plan for the transition to the first world. This is definitely not the first time the country is being called upon to embrace a long-term vision for transformation. In the 1980s, the Ministry of National Planning and Regional Development prepared a long-term development program with the support of the government of Canada. The plans failed to take off because of the structural handicaps and decline in living standards that Kenyans experienced in that period. It took the victory of the National Rainbow Coalition, NAC, in the 2002 elections for the country to make a fresh first start. I had the privilege of being the Minister for Planning and National Development in President Mwai Kibaki's government from 2003 to 2005. As Minister, it became clear to me that with the right policies and full political backing, Kenya could make rapid economic recovery. And indeed it did, raising GDP growth from 3% to a record 8% in 2007. This was primarily the result of the implementation of the Kenya Economic Recovery Strategy for Wealth and Employment Creation. That ran between 2002 and 2007. Once recovery was achieved, the ministry, under the guidance of the National Economic and Social Council, NESC, set about preparing a long-term development strategy that would have seen Kenya make the transition to a middle-income, rapidly industrializing nation. And I remember David Lee was very much involved with us in that next initiative from my office. This is what gave birth to the Kenya Vision 2030, which was inaugurated in 2008 and expires within the next few years. Unbelievable how time flies. The conclusion of Vision 2030 presents us with an opportunity to take stock of the hits and misses under this historic plan and to begin to chart a new long-term development pathway. To move forward, it is both necessary and useful to reflect on the experiences that have shaped our development journey over the past decades. A key lesson learned and captured in the plan we present is that nations do not become prosperous by accident. They do so because they learn from their successes and failures, build institutions capable of sustaining progress, and develop a shared national purpose and ideal that survives changes in political leadership. Let me repeat that. A key lesson learned and captured in the plan we present is that nations do not become prosperous by accident. They do so because they learn from their successes and failures, build institutions capable of sustaining progress, and develop a shared national purpose and ideal that survives changes in political leadership. Another lesson captured here is that Kenya cannot and does not need to duplicate or copy and paste development. Let me repeat. Kenya cannot and does not need to duplicate or copy and paste development. Kenya has to develop in her own fashion, taking cognizance of her unique characteristics, challenges, weaknesses, and strengths. And if we learned anything out of our recent prosperous years from 2002, it is that development requires national unity and social cohesion, political stability, effective government, in short, a strong state, and national pride and confidence. People with no pride or confidence in their country cannot be expected to develop it. We emphasize in this report that development is not just about economics. Kenya was doing very well in terms of GDP when the violence erupted after the 2007 elections. It turned out that despite economic growth, Kenyans were concerned about inclusion and exclusion in the economy. They were concerned about poverty and inequality along income, regional, and gender lines. The youth were frustrated by the absence of comprehensive strategies to tackle widespread unemployment, poverty, and historical economic imbalances that disproportionately affected the younger generation. Economic growth appeared to enhance rather than diminish regional imbalances and became a source of tension and weakness in national development. We emphasize that to develop sustainably, we must build a nation that is united and has a sense of common and shared destiny, an ethnically integrated nation that is fair in its dealings with citizens, a nation with strong moral and ethical values, one that is democratic, liberal, tolerant, caring, equitable, and progressive. We must be intentional about establishing a scientific government that believes in pursuit of innovation and is forward-looking. We must not only consume technology, but we must also be a contributor to the scientific and technological advancement, not only of our country, but also of the human race as a whole. We must grow not only economically, but also politically, socially, culturally, and quite importantly, psychologically. A defeatist attitude that we are too poor, too divided, too small, or too young to develop can be a major hindrance to our takeoff as a nation. Worse still is the belief that it cannot be done. At all times, we must have faith and confidence in ourselves. Like Mwalimu Julius Nyerere once said, "It can be done. Play your part." I'm sure you remember the song. Mwalimu kasema, "It can be done. Play your part." A network of strong and efficient public institutions with a life that transcends the nature, the tenor of political parties in power is of absolute necessity. A network of strong and efficient public institutions with a life that transcends the tenure of political parties in power is of absolute necessity. Furthermore, our country needs a planning agency that coordinates a vast array of the infrastructural projects and that pursues reforms in the productive sectors that will make use of the infrastructure. And indeed, infrastructure is I would say, the key aspect or the backbone of development. The agency will also oversee adherence to physical planning and social and economic activities that will improve the quality of life in a way that ordinary citizens can truly appreciate. It is worth repeating that such an agency will be aided in its work by the National Economic and Social Council, NESC. The constant evaluation of the implementation of the key goals, measuring of results and change in strategy as necessary must be a constant preoccupation of this policy and strategy unit. This aspiration is ambitious, but I have no doubt that it is achievable. Many countries like the People's Republic of China that are today regarded as developed were within living memory poor agrarian societies like Kenya. It is known that about 60 years ago, Singapore dispatched a delegation to Kenya to learn from our development experience. Then they went back and overtook us. South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, and more recently China and Vietnam transformed themselves through deliberate policy choices, capable institutions, and political commitment to transformation over several decades. Perhaps the single most important lesson to be learned from our planning experience since 1963 is the need for sustained political support for the overall national development vision, regardless of political party and across the electoral cycles. This support must be transformed into a nationally shared passion that citizens can be proud of and identified with. We must agree to make the difficult choices in resource allocation that will enable our country to realize the ambitious programs. We must be deliberate in investing in industrialization, higher productivity in agriculture, and mass employment in quality service sector jobs. I repeat, quality service sector jobs. There's some jobs in service sector which are not quality. I won't mention them, but there they are. To make that transition, we must institutionalize and honor the fundamentals that have served every successful newly industrialized country. That is, a politically stable state with an efficient civil service, the rule of law, zero tolerance for indiscipline in social life, macroeconomic stability, and a sustainable public debt. We must pursue first world infrastructure, widespread access to education and health services, jobs, and quality housing for all. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, such commitments cannot lead to concrete and positive outcome without leaders in whom people believe and who, in turn, sustain confidence through performance. The UN population predicts that Kenya will have a majority urban population from the year 2050. The proposed plan must take that into account as a central feature of its objective. From the layout of infrastructure to the provision of education, housing, and health services, the long-term plan will be guided by the overarching reality of an imminent majority urban population in 3 decades. Finally, national takeoff needs a committed, relentless, and unapologetic champion. South Korea had Park Chung-hee. Malaysia had Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. And Singapore had Lee Kuan Yew. It is time for Kenya to have our own. Thank you very much. And before I call Professor Chega to come forward, Mike, where are you? Yeah. You are here. Okay, come. So Mike, let me also introduce others. I wonder whether I did introduce them. The team. Can you stand up again? You are scattered all over. Just stand up and come over. My team, please, don't be shy. They are here. I don't know why they're sitting down. They're all here. Come, please. So that people see you. And Mike will speak on behalf of the team. Mike, can you introduce yourself? Yeah, just introduction.
Professor Michael Chege, part of this team, currently part-timer, University of Nairobi, where I've taught most of my life. I've taught outside the country. Was an advisor, Treasury, Vision 2030, from 2003 to 2013. And I'm very pleased to be here, Your Excellency, as you know, in this task.
Karute Kanyinga, professor at the University of Nairobi Institute for Development Studies, where I specialize in governance and development. Thank you.
George Okongo, an economist who's worked with Professor Nyong'o for many years on most of these things.
I'm Dennis Onyango. I work for a lot of people in the country, but right now I work for Professor Nyong'o on this project. Thank you.
My name is Peter Wanyande. I've taught at the University of Nairobi in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration for over 30 years. Done a lot of work on development. Currently, with Professor Nyong'o in this team, I also work for an organization called the Shalom Center for Conflict Resolution here in Nairobi. Thank you.
My name is Eddie Ila. I work in the office of the governor.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, Deputy President, Cabinet, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to bore you with repeating what's already been said and what you already know, except to say that it's a great honor for me to have been associated with my colleague of many years, Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, in the preparation of the document which was requested by His Excellency the President to provide us with a roadmap towards developing a development plan on a long-term basis that will guide our country after the expiration of the initiative that we undertook, kind of Kenya Vision 2030. I have been tasked this morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, simply to look at the global context that we considered ourselves to be in where we start as we move forward. It is not anything new to any of you to remark that the global framework of multilateralism, the architecture by which states play with one another that was established after 1946 and Second World War, is breaking down. And it is breaking down in a way that we observe from day to day. I was talking to the PS, Foreign Affairs, who was sitting next to me, that yesterday Britain got the seventh Prime Minister in 10 years. They've never seen an instability of that kind before. And they don't know how to get rid of it because the parties that were important after the war are also breaking apart. In our particular case, the UN, even the Bretton Woods institutions, the architecture of trade that was established at the WTO, all these are being brought into question. There are new players which have come into play. The Emirates, the powers in the Gulf, medium powers like Israel, and as well as Turkey, Egypt, etc. All these are major players in both development and also politics of the region. And we cannot move ahead without considering the important role of China, who is today the leading provider of development assistance, the bilateral donor in the world, with terms very different from those which we have played with before, as well as new players, again in the Gulf, but also in Europe and other parts of the world. and not to forget the BRICS. That is the global framework under which this plan that we are proposing is going to be developed. Your Excellency, Mr. President, you've heard this before from us, that in fact, looking at the statistics of the fastest developing countries in the world, it is possible to fulfill the mission of bringing Kenya forward from where we are into an industrialized modern country within one generation. It's been done before and it can be done. The Industrial Revolution, Mr. President, took 70, 80 years in the United Kingdom, the first country to industrialize. That period has been being compressed over as we move to the present. We must take lessons into our planning and internalize in our country. It took the US a shorter period, 70 years, Germany, France, Japan, 40 years, 30 years for South Korea and China. The period is becoming, and the knowledge is there about the drill that allows you to move that way. Why is it that it has been difficult for us to continue a path of rapid growth and industrialization and rapid change with high income for all our citizens when we have seen examples of this, including phases, as Professor Nyong'o said, in our own country before? We have taken lessons from these countries and from our own neighbors and from our own experience, Mr. President, in the preparation of this document, and we back the evidence from the facts that it is indeed possible to do that. The People's Republic of China is now has gone down in history as the fastest growing country in the history of the world for its number of people. In the period of 82 to 883 to about 5 years ago, making that transition, bringing 700 million people out of poverty into prosperity, transforming its people from being predominantly rural to 65% urban, with decent livelihoods and homes and livelihoods and jobs to go, as well as health and education. Just when we ourselves have been watching these developments take place, there are lessons and important lessons to learn from this country as well as industrialization. Mr. President, Professor Nyong'o has just mentioned again the importance of spatial planning. Our country, looking at projections of growth rates in population, will be 50% plus urban in 2050. Just 25 years from now, Kenyans are coming into urban areas whether we like it or not. And our Constitution gives us the right to live wherever you wish in the Republic. The young people want to come to urban areas, 4% annual growth rate of urban. By 2050, 48%, 50% of our population will be urban. We must plan spatial place in urban areas in a way that will accommodate not just in housing, but also in source of livelihood. And that is something that we are taking into account. Mr. President, we looked, as I'm sharing, in the global framework under which this plan will be brought into fruition. And we look at global trading. Again, we must think of it outside the framework and outside the box that we have been brought into in the past. Mr. President, you were saying the other day to this group that we have access to the market of the People's Republic of China, 1.5 billion people, duty-free, quota-free. What is stopping us from exploiting it? Mr. President, we have already got a trade partnership agreement concluded with the European Union. Quota-free, duty-free, and with provisions for products which are familiar with us. Why should a country like Vietnam be getting a greater share of that market compared to us? These are the questions we asked. And they are questions that Kenyans need to ask, and Kenyans are very, very fast moving in taking opportunities. We believe that we are going to find a solution to this problem, Mr. President. Let me also say that the new trade partnership agreement with the United States also answers to these questions. We should move ahead with it. whatever happens to AGOA or not, Kenya's access to these markets will be important. Mr. President, all these factors that we've brought into account that ought to be considered in the long-term plan are important because our country is predominantly young. We have young people who are very well educated and who are asking for quality jobs. A combination of investment, domestic investment, foreign that's happening in the region that Kenyans fail to notice. First of all is the bad news. Because we're quite comfortable here. Kenyans tend to be quite comfortable with their perch. And forget that just right next door in Sudan is one of the largest humanitarian tragedies happening anywhere in the world right now. Yep. I see very few of my friends who are Kenyans. I can preach to students because they are captive to my audience, but I cannot reach a bigger population than that. That Khartoum was just a shell, a complete rubble after what happened in 2019, 2030, and it still is. And it's not very far from here, ladies and gentlemen. And you know, we don't know what will happen in the rest, north, a little bit of the east. I don't want to mention too many countries because they are all here. They are parts of ours. We live in a part of the world which is very, very unstable. On the other hand, there's competition, which also we need to worry about. Because competition is good, it makes you think harder. We're talking about, Mr. President, when you're talking about tourism, Bishoftu, in the airport in Ethiopia. They are out, they are moving ahead, they are on the stock, the contractor is in place. For constructing Bishoftu International Airport, city, accommodation, global hub that will dominate the region for the future, if we're not careful. 15 million tourists per year, Taraput. Center of Boeing assembly as well as services. The kind of activities that normally would come to Nairobi. I'm happy, Mr. President, you are aware we are doing something about the airport here, but these are issues that we cannot look up to with equanimity. Bagamoyo, and Tanzania is not hiding this, $12 billion investment, now shopping for a taker between the Gulf, even Russia, China maybe, who knows what combination, that will bring Bagamoyo into one of the largest seaports doing business on the eastern seaboard of Africa. With the train electric connection that will go to the Tazara and link it to the corridor, Benguela corridor, right through to the Atlantic coast, which the Americans are part of, and the Europeans and so on. Ask ourselves where this leaves us as we look into the future. Mr. President, we looked at many instances like this in which competitiveness in the region could affect us adversely unless we act and act quickly. I just want to say, Mr. President, as I conclude here, and this is a global overview of the situation, that Kenyans are not quitters. We have been for a long time been seen as the lodestar of development in the region. We earned that reputation by hard work, by looking ahead, by determination, by grit, by doing the right thing at the right time. We can still do it. As Professor Nyong'o said, play your part, it can be done.
Another round of applause for Professor Michael Chege. Your Excellency, with your permission, allow me now to invite Professor Karuti Kanyagia, who will give us key highlights of Kanyagia, I was just checking if you're awake. Also to recognize the presence of the judiciary. We do have the judiciary led by Justice Smoking Wanjala, who is a judge of the Supreme Court. We also have the Interfaith Council and the clergy represented. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, sir, Your Excellency, Deputy President, Your Excellency, Prime Cabinet Secretary, and of Public Service, Cabinet Secretaries present and Governors present, good morning to everyone. I know friends have been making a joke that Karuti is going to take us to Singapore. And indeed, that's what we want to discuss here. Professor Anyang' Nyong'o and Michael Chege have already pointed out that this is possible. Your Excellency, Mr. President, sir, when we began this job with Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, we all did recognize that this is about Kenya. It has nothing to do with us as individual independent experts, independent researchers. We said this is a commitment we want to make, to commit our resources, to commit our intellectual ideas into producing a document that can help guide the country in developing this roadmap. And in doing so, of course, we had consultations with the State Department of Planning and of Public Service, Prime Cabinet Minister Office and his team. We had consultations and we have reviewed massive reports, global reports, Government of Kenya reports, reports by different other departments. And that is our role as academics and as researchers. So this guideline that we are producing here, and for my apology that we couldn't produce a PowerPoint because of the people at the back, and some of them don't eat enough carrots anyway. Your Excellency, we thought the best thing to do is to start with by looking at Vision 2030. What have we achieved? What are the gaps? And we realized that actually when you pay attention to Vision 2030, a lot of ground has been covered. We are not where we were in the 1990s. Infrastructure has expanded. Education and health expansion is something that we can see everywhere. And of course, Kenya is leading in terms of digital revolution. There's no one in the world today studying or teaching finance inclusion in any university who does not cite Kenya and M-Pesa. And if you are writing on finance inclusion for your PhD and you don't cite that, a good examiner should fail you. But there are, of course, things that we have not achieved under Vision 2030. We are not where we were supposed to be in terms of having a middle-income country, an industrialized country, Mr. President, sir. Poverty and inequality remain a big challenge. And of course, we did not achieve a double-digit growth. David can tell us the reasons for that, but I won't allow him that time. A major challenge, of course, and we are very honest in this, public sector reforms that initiated the undertaking and implementation of Vision 2030 are a pale image of what they were before. I am afraid that when we review what is happening across the continent, everybody says we borrowed performance contracting from Kenya. But when you talk to Kenya's public servants and when you do research in Kenya, a lot is going now. Many published documents now say Kenyans are ticking boxes. Performance contract is no longer taken seriously. It's about ticking boxes. And we conclude that to move Kenya forward, we must pay attention to public sector reforms. If we don't do that, then this journey is not going to take off in a good way. The other thing that we find is integrity and behavior, ethical behavior among Kenyans. That leaves again requires something that we need to internalize so that we can have Kenyans who are committed to values of integrity and honesty and doing the right things even when no one is watching you, because that is called honesty. Your Excellency, you asked Professor Nyang'o to do one thing, to answer one question. How do we transform Kenya into the first world nation within the life of a generation? And when you asked him that, he assembled us and said, I've been asked a very difficult question here. Karuti, Chege, and Wanyande, how do we answer it? Then we said, let's begin. And what we have done then is actually to think that you are right. This question is worth paying attention to. Because from 1963, when you look at Kenya, we start very well, do the right things, but relapse. Stop, go, stop becomes a characteristic of Kenya's nation. When you look at Southeast Asia, as Professor Nyang'o said, almost everyone was coming to look at what is happening in Kenya and saying, this is what we want to do. They took off and they left us behind. And this is what we call Kenya's paradox of doing exceptionally very well at times and not proceeding with continuity. Policy discontinuity becomes a key feature of our country. A key feature of our country. Now, the problem is, in the West, there's no social scientist in any university who does not know what is called the Kenyan debate. And if you are a serious scholar, you should know what Kenyan debate is. This is a debate of the 1970s and the early 80s that everyone in the world studying development was asking one simple question. How did a country like Kenya manage to transform so well and leave everyone else in Africa behind? The example cited was Kenya and Ivory Coast. And this is something cited everywhere. Kenya was doing right, and that's why everyone was coming to study from us. At the same time, if you look at the development literature again, we were ahead of China. We outperformed China for many years until 1991 in terms of per capita income. Each of you here would have hired 2 Chinese and put change in the pocket. Up to 1991. That's true. Indonesia, the same. Actually, we were ahead of China up to 1992, David. 1992, in terms of everything. So the point is, we can make it because we have made it before. But why is it that we have not made it? Your Excellency, Prime Cabinet Secretary, my friend. There are several reasons we have identified as independent scholars again. And forgive me because some of these realities may be harsh. One, everybody in the world, those who study development studies, acknowledge that Kenya's civil service was the best in the continent. And today, look at World Bank statistics. They say that Kenya's human capital is the best, and in fact, we outcompete everyone. That's why there is business or processing offices being set up on the continent. Language alone. And by the way, my students also write now PhDs for others for a fee. Right? Acknowledged widely. It's covered everywhere that Kenyan students write for those in Europe, America, Australia, for their PhDs, recognizing that we have got a very good human capital index here. But our civil service, again, as I said, when you look at studies that are coming out, there is the scaling that seems not to be at par with what we had in civil service many years back. We need to start reflecting on that. When did we go wrong and what did we need to re-engineer our civil service and our bureaucracy? At the same time, There's lack of policy consistency. We seem to have every election stop some policies, start again. Some governors, Your Excellency, even abandon projects by other governors in order to start their own. This becomes common everywhere in the country. And it's public resources that are being used for the same purpose. This is being done even when there is counter-integrated development plans, CIDPs, and 10-year annual plans. Kenya is a country of paradox. And we say in our report that we are a country of false starts, many false starts. From independence, we've been doing well, we stop. Then we start again doing exceptionally very well, we stop. And everybody comes to copy Kenya. Every time, copying Kenya, and they leave us. Rwanda has copied everything, including our transport, Mr. President, sir. Including how we started organizing borders. But they take and engineer it and move forward. That's the problem we have. So we need to see how best also to improve coordination across government departments. In our reading for this report, in our research for this report, our team has looked at different government agencies. And Your Excellency, Mr. President, sir, let me say with a lot of honesty, there is silos mentality, competition, silos approach. People compete every day, but they don't compete for impact. All of you here, you compete every day, but not for impact or for service delivery. That's what our report is showing. Everybody has a turf. I'm protecting my turf. And we are being very candid as well, we are independent researchers. Well, what do we do? But we have got a lot of work to do. And I think we can because we've done it before. And we have realized actually some countries now in South America, Peru and Chile, have actually done it in about 25 years or less. Not 30 years that we are talking about. We did all this before we finished our report, but when we continued with research, we realized Latin American countries, some of them have done it in 25 years. So it can be done, especially by Kenya, that has been copied by everybody else. Now, let Karuti Kanyinga now take you to the first world, Mr. President, sir. Let me take you to Singapore now. When Mr. President, you said, let's go to Singapore, everybody has been talking about Singapore as if it's the real country we are talking about. I think what we have realized is that Singapore is actually a metaphor or a shorthand for high-income industrialized countries. And we have realized that actually those countries have a number of factors that are very common among them, and this is what we should aim for. One is world-class education, skills, and innovation. And Kenya was there. That's why everybody looks at our human capital index and says, I would like to hire Kenyans. By the way, even xenophobia in South Africa is not touching Kenyan professionals. You touch them, some industries in South Africa will collapse. You touch some business sector in East Africa, some countries which I'll not name in East Africa will not move because Kenyan professionals are managing them. The second thing is high incomes, human capital index, and high quality of life. Life expectancy in these countries is very high. It's over 70 in Southeast Asia, 84 in Singapore, 84 in Europe and several other countries. But in Kenya, here is 64. I can see some friends who are above 64, so you are lucky. Right? They are also characterized by functional service delivery. Services are provided in a very functional manner. You cannot complain about services because the public servants serve the public. They don't compete. They compete actually to serve. And integrity is a common feature. Professionalism is very high. Rule of law. Countries governed by law, where you know very well that this is predictable if I do a mistake. And by the way, we were there in the 70s. Those who came to Nairobi in the 70s remember that very period. A clean country, a country being one of the best in the region. And the poverty, of course, is eradicated. But most important, revenue is generated in a very transparent manner, and the citizens do not fail to pay taxes because they know that if they do so, their services will not be provided. When I was studying for my PhD in Denmark, there's an old lady who took the local municipality to court for not collecting tax from her. Because she said the pothole she's found on the road was the result of these people who have not collected my tax for 2 months. I don't know how the case went because it was in Danish language. So what did these countries do to have all these features? Mr. President, let me just identify a few things, very few things. One, they began by emphasizing integrity in the society. Honesty is embedded and institutionalized at any level. People do the right things even when no one is watching you. That becomes a common practice, whether in darkness or in open daylight. We all know the story of the wallet and the money inside, where it was put in different countries, and including Mombasa, with the names of people, money, and the rest. It was testing integrity. Guess which countries money got lost, and of course you got the wallet, right? Not us, of course. In Kenya, I think the wallet was taken back, but with the names of the people. But that was testing integrity. But the countries in Scandinavia, all of them returned everything. Money, business accounts, and everything. In America, it did not happen that way, sorry. So integrity becomes a very common feature. But they also started on very good policies, and I would like to wind up very quickly and go back to what we need to do. They committed to long-term policies and vision. And every vision they had transcended government. Government would come and meet the same plan. Political parties would compete on how do we, and their manifestos, this is what citizens have accepted as a development plan. We are competing now on how to reach that vision as parties. Government would change, but the direction and the vision would remain the same every time. Governments were also very central. It is governments that were guiding the private sector by giving corrective policies and financing private sector. And even when financing private sector for exports, private sector was disciplined. You are told we are giving you money for exports, but in a disciplined manner, you must produce ABCD. And they started with agriculture, moved it to industries, and then moved it to technology. And then, of course, human capital development. Mr. President, Kenya can get there by paying attention to 3 things as 3 pillars. Our report identifies 3 key pillars that are very critical. We begin with agriculture, but improve on agro-processing, touch on irrigation, and food security. So that once people are food secure, then they get concerned about savings and other things. We must think about industrialization, as Professor Anyang' Nyong'o said, but industrialization for exports. The region is becoming bigger, but we are the only country that is equipped with the responsibility, that is properly equipped to compete in this region. But what are we doing? Manufacturing is shrinking. We are getting competition from different places. Technology and innovation is the other pillar we are talking about. But if we want to succeed, integrity, state effectiveness, and ethical behavior must be the key things to govern our society. We cannot talk about world-class education without talking about ethical behavior. Every day, everywhere. Mr. President, These are the pillars that we are proposing here. We are going forward here and recommending that moving forward, Mr. President, let's begin with national consultations and consensus building on this vision. We should have a vision that outlives electoral cycles. But in order to secure this vision permanently, it is important we think about having a national development law that secures the vision every time so that it is not disrupted by anyone at any particular time. This long-term vision will always be our destination, and then whatever we do in between will be focusing on that destination. Mr. President, there is need to think about establishing the National Economic, Social, and Social Council as the apex institution with an appointed person, appointed by His Excellency the President, to be advising and guiding on how to achieve this destination on regular basis. But we must strengthen coordination, and the silos mentality should come to an end. And after doing that, Your Excellency, then State Department of Planning and other agencies can start preparing sectoral transformation strategies. But we begin with national ownership, participation, and consultations across the country and with different sectors so that we carry the country as one. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanyinga, for that wonderful presentation. Your Excellency, we'll now hear reflections from different areas, starting with Francis Atwoli, who will represent Labour, followed by Jeswinda Jasbedi, who will represent Industry, and Betty Maina for Profession.
You have been listening to teachers. And teachers, that is how they teach, and that is how they put up their cases for the purposes also of getting some exams out of what they have said. Indeed, it is true, I listened to Professor Chege very carefully. I think amongst Kenyan workers, I happen to have been to every city in the world. Some have seen them developing. Indeed, it is true that we were ahead of China. The first Chinese to see a lift, that was in 1963 when the ambassador was presenting his papers in the old Jogo House to our founding father, President Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. So when the Chinese saw the lift here in Kenya, Nairobi, it's historical. And where sometimes I disagree with the professors is that when you want to develop, you must have wide consensus, consult. If you do that here, you will be bogged down. Today, Your Excellency, see the game changer in affordable housing. When you are flying to Kisumu, you will see this is not the Kisumu we used to know. And I want to thank Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. He's also a good example in management of that particular city. That is the only city with clean pavement, very clean city, small city, side of Western Kenya. And I think Anyang' Nyong'o is a very good example on our governance. Governor Paranya did it in Kakamega, where he made sure that every home, there is a tarmac leading those homes in Kakamega, Mumias, and everywhere. And I think we can do it. It's a question of making a conscious decision that we want to develop. I happen to have an office in Accra, Ghana. I have an office. I used to have an office in Sudan, Khartoum, but we moved it to Cairo because of the problems in Sudan. I have an office in Brussels, Belgium, because I'm the vice president of the International Trade Union Confederation. I'm number 2 in the world. I have an office in New Delhi because I coordinate Asia and Africa at international level in the world of work. I have 2 offices in Geneva because I'm the president of Global Industrial Oversight on issues related to industrial relations. China, Asia started like a joke. That was Japan. They moved to South Korea. South Korea got its independence in 1957 together with Ghana. See where South Korea is and where Ghana is. And sometimes, Your Excellency, people have opposed to this. But there must be something wrong, and I want the researchers to carry it out by themselves. Maybe the DNA associated with us on this continent is a DNA pegged to poverty. Because an African would like to, if you say no, I would ask you, Professor, to show me your own personal monthly budget. An African operates without a budget. Or any plan at all. I'm saying so because if you are serious, we have our seat. Let us start with ourselves. Do you know Kenya in this region is a satellite of economic activities in this region? You know, Kenya has able manpower in both in terms of any area of management, be it hospitality, name it, manufacturing, engineering, and so on. But do you know our city has no organized public transport? What's the problem? Our city has no properly organized transport. And I can tell you here, we can mend billions in this country. See what the Egyptians did. They removed stones from the River Nile, from Aswan to Luxor, took away the crocodiles to Aswan Dam, organized that Nile, which comes from Lake Victoria, to become a big source of tourism, put their cruise ships. They attract 2 million tourists a month when we are struggling to have 1 million tourists in this country in a year. We have no cruise ship from Lamu to Kilifi to Atamu, Kilifi, Mtwapa towards to Diani, South Coast, even one. You people, do you know in this country you have no 5-star hotel? A hotel stretching a kilometer. Do you know in the whole of the entire Lake Victoria we have no any boat that can attract tourists? Do you know our airports are not opened up for the international airlines? People who want to go and live in Kisumu, Pasa from Eastern Europe and so on. How do we attract tourists when we don't have a 5-star hotel? Those symbols, let's start with those simple things. Do you know the thing, we have the Dubai. Do you know if you go to Tana River, the whole of Tana county, the county of what? Tana River, we can have a modern Dubai in that particular place. Go to Wajir, Bute, you can put there another Dubai. and then issue of insecurity will not be there, and so on. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I think we need to check as per how do we attract both direct and indirect investments in this country. We have facilities. Professor, if you have a cruise ship cruising, 2 of them on Lake Victoria, and a 5-star cruise ship, and you can have an agreement between your government or this government with Swedish government. They are very good in providing those cruise ships. You will be banking $500 million daily in Kisumu. Along Lake Victoria, around there where people are just staying, people having small farms and so on, we have no a 5-star hotel in those particular places. So what I'm trying to say in another way is that let us attract people who can be able to invest in hotels industry, in hospitality industry, expand our businesses, attract both direct and direct investment, particularly in manufacturing for the purposes of export. And that is where I support Professor Chege's proposals on those areas of making sure that we are directly involved in an area that can be able to make us what we are. This country is a good country, and our president is committed, and we need to support him, because it is not, it's most of the presidents we have had are people who want to put up whatever they want to do. They consider whether they will be re-elected or whether they will not be re-elected. That is not with the current president. The president is committed to making sure that this country forges ahead without whether he will be re-elected, whether he will not be elected, and so on. So I want you people to use this opportunity and to have our Chamber of Commerce supported to make sure that it joins other chambers of commerce and see what they are doing there, invite those people who would like to invest in this country to come and invest in Kenya and create wealth for our people. But that paper to make this country be a first nation is a wonderful paper if it is really put into practice and implemented as it is being proposed for us now. Next time when we have such a gathering, I think we should be reporting on where we want to go and where we are coming from. We have taken a lot of time in this country politicking. We have taken a lot of, and I don't want to go and sit down there before I remind you people that those people who are willing to develop, let them be given support. I have seen what our brothers from Somali community have done in South Sea, in Eastleigh. This has changed the face of that particular place. And this is because of honesty and integrity that they practice amongst themselves. So, Mr. President, I would urge you to continue supporting particularly this area that is clear to us that if we are committed to develop this country, we can be able to commit to develop this country, expand our opportunities, and create more employment for our young men and women. Let me end there by saying we must support the proposals that have come out of this important paper prepared by Professor Anyang' Nyong'o for this country. But let us start by making sure that those small things that we are lacking are done. I did some years back suggest to the Minister for Transport. At that particular time, we had a young man called Kitungo as PS in transport as PS. I told him, if we want to make Kenya bigger, let's move out of Jomo Kenyatta Airport and have a bigger space where we can have a modern airport and build a better airport in a place that we have a proper space than the current Jomo Kenyatta Airport. Because if you look, those countries that have developed, they have airport, a bigger airport that can accommodate more space and attract more airlines than what we are having currently right now. So, Your Excellency, the President, I urge us to continue having this subject, knowing very well that we have not so far done very well as expected. I want to end there by thanking Professor Anyang' Nyong'o's team and ask them to continue making sure that we move forward. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Just Bedi, on behalf of the industry. Let's welcome.
You do, you overlap. And what happens? You all stop moving. And many man-hours are lost. People who will obey traffic lights, even at night, those are not Kenyans now. But those are the people that we need to become. People who will do the right thing, because in disorder, you lose so much. And you encourage people to take, quick, shortcuts. And before long, we have just fractured into a lot of disorder. So I think it's really important to build a culture of integrity and a culture of order. But above everything else, because we have already told ourselves, we've been here before, I hope we can go with the conviction that this is not a far journey. This is actually going back to our days of excellence. Because if people came to learn from us, that means we were excellent people. So your vision, Mr. President, of building a Singapore should actually be telling people, let me take you back to a high-performing Kenya, because that's what it is. I wish you well, I wish us well, and let us continue walking this journey together. It is possible.
Thank you, Madam Betty Maina, and what she's saying is, yes, we can. Your Excellency, at this point, allow me to invite Professor Anyang' Nyong'o and his team to present the report to His Excellency the President. If the team can kindly come and make the presentation to His Excellency of the report. And we'll have two photo opportunities, the first one with His Excellency the President, and after that I'll invite His Excellency the Deputy President together with the Prime Cabinet Secretary to then receive the report also.
Hello, Professor, how are you? Here you go. So you present it to His Excellency. You can stand. Hello, how are you?
If we can just move this way slightly, Your Excellency, yeah, to be in the middle, right there. Some team members to come this side for the photo. If I can request, we just have a straight line. It's bent. If we can just have a straight line, that's it. That's it. Then may I invite His Excellency the Deputy President and the Prime Cabinet Secretary also to receive. All right, thank you. Give them a round of applause. Your Excellency, with your permission, if I may now invite the Prime Cabinet Secretary, who will in turn invite His Excellency the Deputy President and His Excellency the President. A clap for the Prime Cabinet Secretary as he comes to address us.
Your Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable William Samoei Ruto, Your Excellency the Deputy President, Professor Nyong'o and your team, governors, my colleagues in the public space, Your Excellency, let me start by saying hongera to the team. Professor Nyong'o and your team for packaging these very critical thoughts that will guide Kenya going forward. Now, Your Excellency, I came across somebody who was saying kwaheri to us, one of the diplomats from the European Union. And he said that there's a phrase that most people don't like hearing, especially if they are young. So I asked him, what is that phrase? And he said, you remember the phrase, just be patient. Just be patient. That phrase is not popular if you stop at the bus stop at Kikomba. That phrase is not popular if you stop at Kondele. That phrase is not going to be popular if you're at Kongowea. And that phrase will not be popular if you're at Muliro Gardens. There is a sense of impatience. Can we smell that coffee? There is a sense of impatience because our demographics have changed dramatically. So, we must then convert that impatience into a catalyst. It must become the driving force. Mr. President, I don't know if you are patient. I don't know. But to achieve what we are talking about, you're talking of 25 years. Others were patient for 40 years. There's the biblical one, 40 years and so forth. So, my takeaway is this, that let us understand there's a lot of impatience, and therefore we must adjust to address that. Otherwise, it will consume our society. The second issue that I would just want to take away is that we all must be aligned. We must move together. If you are a fan of Liverpool Football Club, you must never walk alone. We must walk together to make sure that we carry everybody. We must reduce the lead time in the policy formulation to the point of implementation. Our legislature has got to play a very pivotal role in helping anchor these good policies into law. Time is of essence. Finally, Your Excellency, it takes courage and determination. What you are pushing through today, and I've chosen that word deliberately, pushing through, because Wakenya ni wagumu. The affordable housing agenda, rehabilitating the river in Nairobi, pushing to have the development that goes in, if we don't have a way of managing even the framework of public participation, and Parliament, I'm coming back to you to help us. There's a law pending. Please help us reduce this extremely elongated process of public participation. I'm not saying dispense of it, but surely we cannot be going through public participation on a policy for 3 to 4 years and expect to get to Singapore. We will need to work together. So, since I started with the word patient and impatient, I know you are getting impatient because you want to hear the president and not Musalia Mudavadi. So, Mr. Deputy President, the fire must be fire.
Thank you, my brother Musalia, our Prime Cabinet Secretary. Your Excellency, sir, I have listened carefully to what we have heard this morning from the team led by Professor Nyang'nyong'o. And looking and listening to all the distinguished, esteemed academics who have spoken here, also having listened to Mzee Atwoli, our dad there, very, very experienced trade unionists, having listened to Betty there from industry and Betty, we are in good space. And I'm very blessed to be a son of Kenya because this is a great country, Your Excellency, that you're leading. I think we are fairly clear on the things we need to do based on a glimpse at this report into the future. What we need to do about the primary sector, which is our land that God gave us, with its potential for agriculture and the mineral wealth, which is a primary sector. And no country is very difficult. This is something that perhaps when we do the public participation that we have said we will do, be shorter, take a shorter time. Developed nations, many have developed differently, but I insist that the primary sector is the most durable way of underwriting long-term, sustainable, and permanent movement into the first world. I say so because there is emerging thinking that the service sector and other things that have emerged in the last few decades could also underwrite long-term movement into the first world. I don't think so, because of the possibilities of disruption of those sectors that could set us back again. Tourism is good, and all the other service sectors are good, but they could be disrupted by some of the things that we've seen lately. So the only permanent underwriter of long-term national transformation into the first world will still remain the primary sector, our land, and also now the second pillar, as has been suggested, will be the productive sector, manufacturing, and the services sector now come in, transports and logistics and so on. And then finally, has been ably put out by this report, the enablers, our education, innovation, science and technology, research, value system, which is very important. And one of the speakers mentioned something in passing, which for me, I am beginning to believe is one of the missing links to answering the question that was posed by Mzee Atwoli on why we don't get it right as Africans, as black people. And that is confidence. I think we have all these factors, you know, a young population, good land, mineral wealth, but the confidence, the belief in our ability to do it like everybody else is something that we must build in ourselves. And you've led us very ably, Mr. President, in reminding us the need for us to believe in our country, to believe in ourselves, and make sure that nothing takes away our country's long-term interest from our view. So, Your Excellency, today is not my day. I am just very excited that this is a good discussion that we are having as we look into the future. And Professor Nyong'o and the other distinguished members of his team, and I hope going forward we'll have women members into this thinking, and our young people as well, so that we discuss the future together as you lead us and you guide us in how we move now that we have a starting point from our good brother Prof and the team. I just wanted to end by saying that they have helped us answer or start looking at a possible answer for the big bottleneck that has disturbed Africa and most of the developing world, which is policy disruption. Professor Kanyinga spoke about policy disruption. That is the biggest threat to the developing world, where every administration wants to come and do what they think is okay. And I've been asking myself, how do we incubate, how do we insulate the vision for Kenya from this administration, the next administration, and the other administration? And they have told us we must start anchoring the vision for Kenya in law. And once it's anchored in law, we are not saying it cannot be adjusted, because again, it could be adjusted, but it must be difficult to adjust it. So you'll have to go to Parliament and try and amend, you know, that law, and that incubates at least this process in a big way from disruption. So I think that's a starting point of handling policy disruption. And I hope, Your Excellency, as you lead us into moving this discussion forward, maybe you may consider to also have political parties being part of this discussion so that nobody feels left behind. And when I say political parties, it means anybody, even if it's an opposition political party and you want to build into the thinking around this national vision, I think they should be welcomed from as early as possible, because this is not about your administration. It is not about a particular political party. And political parties, being institutions of our governance, should be invited from very early, if those that want to participate, so that we depoliticize this matter. Mr. President, I've spoken for too long, which is unlike me, because the moment was a bit special. Welcome and speak to us.
Asante sana. Distinguished guests, friends, this is a very special morning. The hallmark of every great nation is not that it has all the answers. It is that it never stops asking the right questions. Such nations possess the confidence to examine
themselves honestly, the wisdom to learn from experience, and the courage to continually renew themselves for the future. They understand that national transformation is never a destination to be reached. Rather, it is a continuous process of reflection, adaptation, and reinvention. It was in recognition of this truth, in my State of the Nation address last year, I invited Kenyans to begin looking beyond today's challenges and to start reflecting on what our future should look like. As part of that national reflection, I informed the nation of my extensive consultation with current and former national leaders, including my predecessor, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and the late Right Honorable Raila Odinga. I have also engaged governors, members of parliament, business leaders, professionals, scholars, and young people. In my conversation with the late Right Honorable Raila Odinga, he consistently reminded me that no nation has ever developed without inclusivity and unity in diversity. I remember he mentioned to me about infrastructure, and infrastructure. My discussions with President Uhuru Kenyatta similarly underscored the importance of continuity in national development and the need to build upon foundations already laid. Together with many other engagements, those reflections reinforced a simple but profound lesson. Every nation that has transformed itself first imagined a future greater than its present, and then pursued that future with discipline, consistency, and patience. In that same State of the Nation address, I informed Kenyans that having restored stability, rebuilt confidence, strengthened our economy, and laid the foundation for sustained, inclusive growth under the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, we were now ready to take Kenya to the next level. I therefore outlined our roadmap for the next phase of our country's transformation, including the establishment of two enduring national institutions: the National Infrastructure Fund, to finance the infrastructure that will underpin our future competitiveness, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, to preserve and invest our national wealth for the benefit of the future generations. I am pleased that since then, we have moved from commitment to implementation. The National Infrastructure Fund has now been established in law, its board appointed, and the institution's secretariat is underway. The Sovereign Wealth Fund has likewise been established in law and will now be operationalized, completing another important milestone in building the institutions that will support Kenya's long-term development. These institutions form part of a broader strategy that is already guiding Kenya's long-term transformation into a competitive first world country. But institutions alone do not build great nations. They must also be guided by great ideas. Following extensive consultations with many stakeholders, particularly with the former Prime Minister, and as part of our broader national reflection, I invited Professor Hiroyuki Hino, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, and their distinguished colleagues to undertake an exercise in scholarship and strategic thinking on Kenya's future beyond Vision 2030. Today, we receive the outcome of that important assignment. On behalf of the government and the people of Kenya, and on my own behalf, I sincerely thank Professor Hino, who is not here with us. He was meant to be here, but due to flight complications, he was not able to come. But I'm told he will be joining us in due course. Thank Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, Professor Michael Chege, Professor Karuti Kanyinga, Professor Peter Wanyande, and every contributor for this remarkable act of scholarship and patriotism. Asanteni sana. It is true that when I discuss this matter with colleagues and the senior leaders in our country, we said let's start somewhere. And I did ask Professor Hino, Professor Michael, and Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o here to give us some ideas. And they developed a team with which they worked with, and we are very happy that we now have a report. This proposal is a thoughtful and valuable contribution to an important national conversation. Its value lies not in providing every answer, not even in the composition of the team, but in asking important questions, challenging our assumptions, broadening our thinking, and enriching our reflection on the choices that will shape Kenya's future. All these efforts are driven by one larger reality. For nearly 2 decades, Vision 2030 has provided our nation with a shared sense of direction. It has guided reforms, inspired investment, and shaped Kenya's development journey. But every nation and every national vision eventually reaches its sunset. As Vision 2030 approaches its conclusion, the responsibility now falls upon our generation to imagine what comes next. I have just had an opportunity to glance through this report. While I have much more to study and reflect upon, I am encouraged that many of the issues it raises speak to the strategic direction we have already begun pursuing. Far from beginning from scratch, the report builds upon foundations already being laid while offering thoughtful perspectives that can enrich Kenya's long-term transformation. These are ideas that deserve careful study, thoughtful reflection, and broad national engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, development cannot be a project of one administration, nor should every election require us to abandon one national vision and begin another. Professor has told us nations don't develop by accident. It has to be intentional, deliberate, planned. Nations that achieve lasting prosperity succeed because they sustain a common purpose across decades, even as administrations change. Kenya must cultivate that same discipline. We must think beyond electoral cycles, sustain what works, improve what can be made better, and build a national consensus around our long-term aspirations. I have said that we have done so much to get our country's economy on the rails. And 3 years ago is so fresh in my mind when we sat in a room called Room 6 here with colleagues and friends, including David and my Council of Advisors. And that the situation then was very different from the situation today. In that room, 3.5 years ago, we were grappling with a $2 billion debt that was threatening to torpedo our country. Today here, we're discussing the National Infrastructure Fund, which has $2.7 billion cash, not debt. That, in my opinion, is significant. Also, when I had a conversation with my predecessor, and he talked to me about continuity, I remember when we prepared the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, and I am very proud about the manifesto that we wrote. Sometimes I ask myself how we managed to write such a manifesto. And I want to thank my predecessor, President Uhuru Kenyatta. He gave me leave of absence for like 2 years. And I used that time to write this manifesto. With David and colleagues, we sat in my office in Karen and we went through. And most of what is in that manifesto has a huge element of continuity. Whether it is on education, on health, on housing, on agriculture, it has a big reflection on what we had tried to do in Jubilee under President Uhuru. We remember very well that the foundation was laid on our education. First President of Kenya laid the foundation on matters education. The second President expanded education, created more institutions, additional universities. President Mwai Kibaki came with universal primary education. President Kenyatta told us effectively that we must have 100% transition. And it has been my responsibility to make sure that when we have 100% transition, we have the classrooms. That's why we built 23,000 classrooms to eliminate the gaps that were there. We must have enough teachers. That's why we've hired 100,000 teachers. And I want to say we have worked on the university funding model now, or higher education funding model for that matter. And because we have members of parliament here, including the chair of education, Mr. Meli here, that now we have in parliament the final version of how we are going to make higher education universal. Finally, it will not matter the background of any child in Kenya. It will matter how good they are only. And going into the future, I know we have been trying to grapple with how do we fund our higher education in colleges, in our Kenya medical training centers, and in our universities. We tried the differentiated model. I think the vice chancellors here know it didn't work because it made most of our universities almost close down. Because while we promised 80% funding, we went down to 40%, and most universities suffered. We have worked on what we thought was equity, where we said parents will contribute a small portion, we will give a portion of loan, we will give a portion of scholarship. That creates equity, but it's not good enough. Now we are moving to universal under the amendments we have taken to Parliament. So going forward, any university, any student, so long as they have passed their exam and they have been placed in a college or a university, each one of them will get full funding for their higher education. It will be the choice of parents if they want to pay. But if parents don't want to pay, we now have a model that will pay for every child. And we are doing it because we want to be deliberate. Countries that are ahead of us, that we were together, had high quality education. Education was a central pillar. My team tells me that education makes us equal and has no equal. Do you remember that phrase somewhere? That is where we are taking this. And I want to implore on Parliament to expedite the amendments to the Higher Education Loans Board so that beginning September, we can make sure that any child, because we have incidences, for example, where a child from an underprivileged family who qualifies to do medicine fails to do medicine because their parents cannot afford to pay the household contribution and have to change to go and do a different course. We want to stop that. We want to make sure that if a child qualifies to do engineering or medicine, funding does not deter them from achieving their goal. That the government of Kenya must be able to support every child. And on and on. As government, we shall now study this proposal carefully. We shall engage with its recommendations, consult widely, reflect on the ideas this proposal advances. And once that process has been concluded, I will communicate the way forward as we shape Kenya's next long-term national vision. And as we undertake that process, I also invite all the stakeholders represented here today to study this proposal carefully and engage constructively with the ideas it advances. I want to encourage you to carry this conversation into our universities, research institutions, businesses in our counties, chair of Council of Governors, professional associations, places of worship, and in our communities and villages. The next chapter of Kenya's development cannot be written by government. It must be shaped by the collective wisdom, experience, and participation of the Kenyan people. Today's ceremony, therefore does not mark the end, but the beginning of a process. Let us approach this task with confidence, humility, and a shared purpose, determined to leave to the future generations not merely a stable economy, but a stronger nation. I have listened to the good professors who spoke here, and as I continue to listen to them and their perspectives and where we've come from and how many have borrowed ideas from us, used those ideas to do better than us, it calls upon us as a people now to imagine the future we are all looking towards and to do the things that will never again make us drop the ball. And I must speak specifically to the people sitting here and those outside here who are leaders. You know, the responsibility, friends. I know we have tried to give many explanations on why we haven't moved as we should or as we expected. The biggest challenge in my reflection is that leadership must play a very central role. Political leaders, business leaders, civil society leaders, professional leaders, all leaders, religious leaders, we must all bring our leadership to bear for us to move this country to the next level. And we must own up that it is us. And that is why I keep saying, I will lead from the front as much as is practically possible for me. I will not try to hide behind, maybe so-and-so, maybe this was not. Because what we have achieved today in the last 3 years has not been easy. I had many opportunities to back down and to say, okay, it's become difficult. The courts have decided. The people have said something different. Some groups have pushed back. But you see, together, we have moved. And I want to appreciate that Parliament has made a huge contribution. The courts have assisted us to create a better future. I remember on housing, for example, the court suggested to us that please go and do a proper law. And we went and did a proper law. So they have made a contribution towards where we are going. The people gave their views, and everybody has come together. And that is why we are implementing that process. So it takes leadership from across sectors for us to be able to move forward. You have said, Professor Kanyinga, that, we were better than China in 1981, 82, 83. I mean, that is so recent. Every one of us here was born by then, right? Just imagine that. That China was just a, country poorer than us. How many years ago? 30 years ago. Look at where they are. So when we say that this great country of ours can become a first world country in our generation, it is doable. Play your part, as Anyang' Nyong'o told us. It is doable, play your part. Everybody must play their part. And we must believe in ourselves. You know, we must believe. The challenge, you know, that I come across with many people in leadership positions is that they have given up. You know, they're just there, you know, telling us how impossible things are, how others have tried and failed, how this has been tried and failed. So what the hell are you doing if you have no energy to move things to the next level? Please exit. Get out of the way. You're causing a jam. Honestly, you know? I mean, if you have no energy to move anything anywhere, you know, you're just a stumbling block, you are, you know? So really, we must believe in ourselves, and we must believe in a greater Kenya than the one we have today. I am so persuaded about a first world country that is Kenya, that we must do everything and anything to get ourselves going. When Professor Kanyinga said how Kenya was better than many countries, we were better than this country, we were better than this country. I saw a report the other day, about, I think a week ago, and I asked my gentleman there to Google it for me. Can you bring it? I want to read that thing. Yeah, this was just a report, I think, a few days ago. And the report says, just hold on, yeah, it says here, Kenya's stock market ranked among the world's best performing markets. This is 4 or 5 days ago. And this is the story. The Nairobi Securities Exchange has indeed been ranked as the 4th best performing stock market globally in the first half of 2026, delivering an impressive all-share index return of plus 26%. The bourse outperformed major international markets like the US Nasdaq, the UK FTSE 100, China's Shanghai Composite. Did you get that? Yeah? This is not my report. You can go and Google it. Right? We outperformed the US Nasdaq, the UK's FTSE, the China's. This is not many years ago, Professor Kanyinga. This is last week. So we were doing well then. We have begun to do well again. Maybe I should read a bit of it. Just the primary catalyst fueling this historic rally include banking sector surge, strong corporate earnings, and renewed investor confidence that have given massive growth, with the banking index delivering exceptional returns. Top performing stocks, companies like Car and General, Kenya Airways, I&M Bank, posted staggering gains for investors, shifting to equity. Lower yields on government bonds, you know what that means, have sparked a localized shift towards equities, pushing the Nairobi Securities Exchange market capitalization to historic high of over 3.8 trillion. That is Kenya. So if any one of you had any doubt in the possibilities that this country can make, please start believing in your country. Start believing in your country. And as we engage in this process, because it's going to be a robust process, it's not going to end in weeks or months, maybe it'll take us a year or so, we must have a robust conversation as a country on what the future of Kenya is. This is not about the next election. This is about the future of Kenya. Yeah, the future of Kenya. The next election will come and go, but we must focus, because whoever wins or loses the next election will be here. Nobody's going to leave the country. So we're going to be here, and the future of Kenya will matter to everybody, those who win and those who lose. Yeah? And so it is very important that we think about the future of our country. And finally, as we focus about that future, I have said we must believe in ourselves, we must believe in our country, and we must be patriotic. And as been said here, integrity must be the benchmark of our engagements. We must be honest, brutally honest with ourselves. I will give you an example. We are a country that believes, we are a robustly democratic country. When I went to the G7, among the issues that was in conversation was artificial intelligence and how it's going to power the future, and how social media is going to, it continues to affect society positively and negatively. And Kenya, for your information, is number one in the whole world in the use of social media. Number? It is said that every Kenyan, or on average, Kenyans spend 4 hours and a few minutes every day you know? And all the stuff in there, you know what is in that social media story, you know? But even with all that, we are still surging forward. We're still moving forward. And it is very important, therefore, for us to think about, I have said, the education of our country, the security of our country. It is very important. You've had reflections by some people here who have told us about Khartoum. Khartoum was a beautiful city 3 years ago. Today it is rubble. And the world is moving on. The rest of the world is moving on. They have destroyed their country, but the rest of the world is moving on. People are trying to help, we're trying to do whatever we can do. So, we must secure our country. I have been following the debate, you know. We had the demonstrations, democratic, constitutional, legal. But we also have criminals and thugs and characters who destroy people's property, steal from people, burn down buildings. And you know, we are unable to make a decision. You know, you find people who've come to town, they've destroyed, burned down shops, destroyed people's property. And, the conversation is, please, these are our children. These are our children, so we must listen to them, which is okay. Yes, must listen to them. We continue. Some people arrested, with criminality, taken to court. They're given a bond of 200 shillings. They live there, because they're our children. And then they go on. They now go to political rallies. And then we have goons. And then I don't know whether we want to say again, these are our children. The goons. So, we really need to have a candid conversation about criminality, the rule of law, security of our nation. It cannot be the case. There cannot be any defense for criminality. There cannot be any defense for breaking the law. I am very happy that the last time there was an attempt for criminality in town and we stopped it, many Kenyans agreed that no, it's now time for us to say no to people who want to ban our property. And that is going to be the future. I am very, it's now clear that everybody, every sector of our society, the business leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, have all agreed that having lawlessness, goons and all these other characters, criminals, should be stopped. Now that we have a consensus, our security agencies must do their job. Within the law, they must do their job and they must stop criminality. That is how we are going to secure Kenya's future. Even as we discuss this future of our nation in the context of what we are saying. So we will go through this report, and in a short while, I will then propose a way forward on how this report can now, ignite a national conversation for all of us. No political parties, no religious. I'm saying no divisions. We're not. It's not going to be about members of this or that. It's going to be about all of us, all political parties involved, all sectors of our society involved, all professional groups, civil society groups, religious organizations, business people, political parties, all Kenyans from all walks of life should be able to participate in a conversation about the future of our country and how we are going to secure it beyond the competition of political administrations that will come and go, but our goal must remain the same. That is what other countries have done, and that is why they are way ahead of us. And so we must move together. Once again, I thank Professor Hino, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, Professor Michael here, Professor Karuti Kanyinga, Peter Wanyande, and your team. And I hope, Professor, when we assemble the next team, we will have a more balanced, with young people on board, with women on board, with other professional groups on board, so that, and I'm sure that that will be the case as we go into the future. Thank you very much for your insights, and all your distinguished colleagues, and all those who contributed to this very important work, and to all of us for these moments of reflection. Asanteni sana, and God bless you.